let's start first by asking, sort of, with ECU, what are some of the things that you do with students, whether it's programs, whether it's the kind of work, like the kind of care that you do?
So we do a lot of one-on-one. So one-on-one listening, pastoral care, a lot of one-on-one support for students. And I actually found that during COVID, the Zoom room is amazing for some one-on-one, right? Because there's a lot of social anxiety. It's huge. And to tell a student, okay, here's where my office is. You have to go down this hallway, enter this door, navigating all the different buildings of U of T. Um, that's a lot of anxiety and stress. So to be able to just send a link to a Zoom room and say, hey, meet me here, and you can be at your home drinking your tea with your cat, and I'll be here. So I would say that one-on-one during COVID, the Zoom was a gift and reduced social anxiety. Anyway, we do a lot of one-on-one. I'll let Tim chime in on a bunch of other things, but I will be starting a grief support group, co-facilitating that, and that's starting in October. So that's for students who have experienced a death. And we're finally moving back to some in person and some online this year. So we're sort of excited about the return to, we're not fully in person, but the return to some in person gatherings. Um, yeah, those are some of the things that I'm excited about. But I'll let Tim chime in on the other ones.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would just, in terms of programming, in addition to what Jeanette mentioned, we have a wide range of programming on campus for students. Everything from, ecology and spirituality programming to queer and religion, to programming that looks at the intersection or intersectionality of creation and spirituality, as well as, indigenous truth and reconciliation, etc. And so, there's a lot going on, but one of the things that we are really focusing on this year is the building of community. And this has grown out of a conversation that's been taking place for 4 or 5 years around this, the reality that I think Jeanette mentioned, and that is that many students at U of T feel isolated and alone. And we see that in, unfortunately, in increased suicide rates that oftentimes, sort of we don't want to talk about. We see it anecdotally when we talk to students and we hear them express that to us in any myriad of ways, that they feel isolated and they feel alone, despite the fact that they're surrounded by people. And there's a whole number of reasons for that, but one of the things that we believe that we can do practically is to help build an inclusive, vibrant, diverse community of faith on campus where students can come and plug in and connect with each other and connect with God and learn and grow and live life together. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're starting up a weekly gathering where students are invited to come and have food and have conversation and talk about faith and talk about life. And we feel that this type of just very broad-based opportunity to gather on a weekly basis, as simple as that sounds, right? That's just sort of very, very simple and almost fundamental, but at the same time, it's something that we lose sight of at a place like the University of Toronto because it's so big, it's so multicultural, it's so multifaceted. It's very, very difficult, as ironic as it sounds, it's very, very difficult to build and form real community where students can come and connect and build relationships, life-giving relationships on a regular basis. It's very difficult to do that, and so we're sort of doubling down on it. It would be much easier just to focus on sort of interesting topics and programs where students can come and receive something and go away, but we feel like maybe the antidote to this isolation and this loneliness is to provide something that's a bit more stable on an ongoing, continual basis where students know they can come and connect. And so that's one of the things that we're really focusing on this year, while we're continuing some of the programming that we've been doing for years. And so we're kicking that off actually this coming Tuesday, and we don't know who all will show up. There may be 5 or 6 or 7 of us. There may be 10 or 15 of us. We don't know for sure, but we're going to give it a try, and we're going to do it on a regular basis, and then just begin inviting people to come and to connect. So that's something that, of course, is always a part of chaplaincy work on some level, but we're just trying to do it in a little bit of a different way this year, and so we're really excited about that.
I just want to make one more plug because I don't think it's been explicitly said, so it doesn't really, maybe it relates, maybe it doesn't. But I would say that one thing that's unique about our chaplaincy and other United Church affiliated chaplaincies is that we are queer positive and affirming. And the climate is changing around, we know, and the trans rights and the Conservative Party, like some of these things are really changing. And just to say, like, we are a queer affirming and queer positive chaplaincy. So just to name that as a place where we want to be safe and we want to hold together and support those students too. Yeah, I think it's important to name. I think the climate is changing, and and I just wanted to name that as like this is also something we do. Yeah, and I think there's a deep spiritual longing and craving. In fact, I was hearing a bunch of people, university academics talking about it, that they think there's a different sense of a spiritual awareness on campus than there has been in the past. So that's really interesting. To just 2 weeks ago at orientation, someone mentioned that. I thought, huh, it's never been gone from us because we live in that. But for others outside of that context to observe that students are interested and are curious and are intrigued by the spiritual life or about meaning and value and purpose and identity, which are spiritual questions across traditions.
Nice. Uh, you both have been around university students for a long time. You both have done a large amount of chaplaincy experience. And I think the big question that a lot of people are going to ask when dealing with university chaplaincy is why? Why chaplaincy? What is so important about chaplaincy, especially for university students?
Yeah, I'll jump in and just share just an initial thought. I recognize that from a local church point of view, and also from an institutional point of view when it comes to the church, ministry with university students doesn't really pay for itself, right? University students, they don't show up usually on Sunday mornings in local parishes. They don't contribute because they're sort of net, they're net negative on income, not net positive. They can't contribute financially. And so a lot of times I think there's a tendency to think, why would we pump a lot of resources, financial resources as well as human resources, into ministry with university students when we know that university students, the large majority of university students don't attend local parishes. They don't, they're not overly involved in local churches during their university experience or time, and they're not able to contribute, financially at least. But I think that it's a bit short-sighted because the reality is we know that university students bring a tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous number of gifts, and if we could find ways to connect the passion and energy and to some degree the idealism of our university students with local parishes, it could really be a source of great renewal, I think, for the church, and also of course, students, I think, also need that experience of that multi-generational community that you can only find, that it's difficult to find outside of the local parish when it comes to, spirituality. So, Jeanette and I and other campus ministries offer spiritual programming for students at the university, and that's essential, and that's, a big part of what we do. But that can't replace, I think, the local church as well. And so, we're looking for ways that we can connect students with local churches and the ministries of local churches with students on campus. But it is a real challenge, though.
Absolutely. And with that, on the other side, with Jeanette, I'm wondering if you want to talk about just sort of how the kids are doing. How are the students doing? Because it sounds like university chaplaincy, that is a much needed thing, not just at sort of connecting people at the church level, that they always stay connected with their spiritual roots, but also at the student level, as you have these 18-year-olds, they come to university, many of them away from home for the first time in their entire lives, meeting all new people and experiencing all these new things. And so how does university chaplaincy sort of fit into that larger landscape?
Yeah, while you were both talking, I had this image of sort of, how like Jesus did a lot of teaching at the temple, but Jesus also wandered around to where the people were, right? Like he met people by the well or he met people on the road. And I sort of think about chaplaincy, in particular university chapel, as meeting our people where they are. And our people happen to be at the university. So following that model of saying we can care about people outside of the walls of a church or a temple, but in the spaces where they are at. And university is such an amazing time in people's lives. Like it's just so formative in terms of asking questions and exploring identity, figuring out relationships. Yeah, and I think university students, there's such a wide range. Like we're meeting some pretty amazing young adults who are passionate, who feel called to certain careers and to making changes in the world and contributing to the common good. So that's pretty exciting. And then we meet students who are really, I think that one of the things, the refrains that I keep hearing is a lot of loneliness. So really, really lonely and really trying to find community and find where they belong, right? So when you leave home and that's gone, where do you fit in and where is that place of belonging? And those are deeply spiritual questions around identity and purpose and meaning. So it's an exciting, like, there's a lot of excitement and energy, and there's a lot of loneliness. And I think we hear about it in the news too, like a lot of struggle with mental health and mental well-being. And what does that look like for young adults and for students?
I even remember I was a U of T student back in the day, graduated in 2013, and like it always surprises me that so much of, and I say this with love to U of T, and it's in other universities as well, but for many schools, there's such an emphasis on the academic side, and that is important. Make sure that you go to class, make sure you study, make sure you do your assignments. But it there's such an emphasis on it that even as I talk with university students now, a large part of the conversations have been, I can't make friends, I'm busy studying. Or do I even want to, ask that one person out in my class that I kind of like, and immediately being told, no, you need to focus on studying, focus on your classwork, and like not worry about who you are as a person, worry about who you are as a student first. And it just feels so weird to say that to students when they're finally at a point where they can create who they are and really explore who they are as people.
Yeah. I think it's hugely stressful. Like, and think about the financial stress of going to university. And a lot of U of T students are commuting and holding other jobs and the pressure to do well academically. So it's a very stressful time. So to be there in the midst of that stress and accompany students along that, or help them find resources to cope, to say, hey, like you're not alone. We can connect you to community, but we can also connect you to accessibility or academic support or mental well-being support. So being able to be holistic in how we can be with students.
I would just mention that I think that there is increased anxiety on some level among some students, not all students, but an increased anxiety, sort of a social anxiety, to gather together in large groups of people, but also with people in general. Among other students, there's an excitement to return to being together in person. Another factor, and this goes out beyond the university, I think this is universal, there is now almost an expectation that any program that you do is offered at least hybrid, that there's at least a virtual option to everything that you do. And this is the new world that we live in, and I would say this is probably the primary difference that I see. There's always a desire among students and others to have that as just the convenience of gathering together virtually. And so that affects everything from, our ministry team meetings where we're meeting with our student leaders, to programs that we hold. And, most everything that we do now, if it's not virtual, if it's in person, there's almost always a hybrid option. And that comes with some benefits, but I think also some challenges. But I think that probably the benefits outweigh the challenges, I think. So I think that it's going to be a good thing in the long run, because we'll be able to gather together in person, but then, when students aren't able to gather together, they can join virtually. And so I think that's a good thing. And honestly, a silver lining around, the cloud of COVID that's hung over us now for several years.
Absolutely. And even as I was hearing us talking about this, I'm wondering if, Tim, if you have any comparison between the sort of the Canadian chaplaincy landscape and the Texas chaplaincy landscape. I'm not even going to say American, because American in Connecticut is very different from American in Louisiana and everything in between. But certainly the Texas to Toronto landscape, if you want to talk about sort of what that difference is.
Yeah, two completely different worlds, as you could imagine. Where I was in Texas, they often would jokingly call it the buckle of the Bible Belt. Not just the Bible Belt, but the buckle of the Bible Belt. The town that the university that I served was located, it was located in a town that had three church-affiliated universities, if you can imagine. And so tens of thousands of students in this one town, all attending church-affiliated universities. If I was to guess, there was diversity on campus in terms of religious affiliation, but if I was to guess, it would probably be self-reported 85 or 90% Christian and on campus, and then there was diversity within that, so different Christian denominations, but the vast majority, the large majority would identify as Christian. And compare that to a place like the University of Toronto and Toronto and the GTA as a whole. Christianity, or the Christian population, is probably one of the minorities on campus when it comes to overall worldview. Overall worldviews. And so that's a drastically different context to do ministry, not only in terms of doing ministry specifically with Christian students, but also, we relate to students from all types of different backgrounds. Some students who come from, another faith background, Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist. On any given day, I have conversations with students, certainly who come from non-Christian backgrounds, as well as non-religious backgrounds as well. Students who identify as agnostic or atheist or humanist. And so this is a radically different context for sure than where I was in Texas. Some really great opportunities for shared conversation and shared learning because of that. And so while there are maybe some challenges when it comes to forming community, because you have students from such drastically different backgrounds and worldviews, and so how do you bring those students together in a healthy way and help them to share life with one another, and be supportive of one another and learn from one another, rather than seeing every worldview that is not like my own as something that is a threat to me personally. And so I think that there's some great opportunities, but also some great challenges because of that. And one other thing that I'd mention that's quite fascinating to me, a difference between sort of the American landscape and the Canadian landscape in general, is that in the U.S., despite the fact that maybe religiosity or religious adherence might be slightly higher in the U.S. in some ways, the diversity of religion, of course, is greater at least in the GTA for sure. But despite all of that, I think that what we find at the University of Toronto is very different than what you would find in the US in terms of, you have this division between secular and religious in the US. And so you have either a secular state university or you have a private religious university. And there are tons of private religious universities. At the state universities, all of the sort of religious experience is usually completely separate from the life of the academy. Well, at the University of Toronto, as soon as I arrived, I heard there was something called the Multi-Faith Center, and that was actually built by the University of Toronto, funded by the University of Toronto, that the University of Toronto formed what they call a chaplains council, and that this chaplains council, was included religious leaders from all different faith backgrounds, and that was all funded by the University of Toronto, which is a state university. Well, you wouldn't really see that at a state university in the U.S., and so that's a very different dynamic as well, that I actually think is a very positive thing. And so, I think there's a whole number of reasons for that, but a very different, I think, dynamic in the Canadian context.
So what are some of the things that would be on your plate right now working with students? Sounds good. I think that we've covered a little bit about how the students are doing, about how you take care of the students, and I think the final question I have that I like to ask is, most of the people that would be either watching this, listening to this, they may not be uni students themselves. They may be the relatives of them, or the friends, or the neighbors, or the other people that say, oh, this kid at our church is now going to school and we won't see them until Thanksgiving, if that. And I'm wondering if you have any notes on what to do, or anything that you want to give for those who it's their grandkid that's going to university, or it's their kid that's going, and they may have questions. They may be worried about how they're doing. They may be worried about just their kid in general, because it's our right and privilege to worry about children as we send them off to go explore. If you have any final thoughts that you want to give for those people as well.
I don't know if I have any. I just check in on them and love them, right? It is stressful, and there's a lot of learning and growing that's happening. So just making sure that you're connecting and checking in and loving them. Certainly point them to chaplains. There are United Church affiliated chaplains in a lot of universities across Canada, right? So not just at U of T. And I think chaplains can be a great resource. It can be awkward, so students may not want to find us, and that's okay. We don't take it personally, but there are chaplains across many different universities that can help support, who understand the university context, and can also. But I think the gift of being a chaplain is that we're not university employees. We are self-funded. We have an agreement that we can be on campus, but we are not university employees. So conversations with us do not impact an academic record. And so we can help navigate, we have this sort of unique place which can help us help students navigate the space on campus, and we can provide support and friendship. And so point students to chaplains if you think that would work for them. Otherwise, just love them. Check in on them. They need it. We all need it. Let's be clear. We all need it. Yeah. I don't know. What would you add things, Tim?
No, I think those were two great points. Connect them, help them connect with chaplains, and love on them. And also I think that local churches and local ministers, although I mentioned that that oftentimes university students and university ministry are sort of the overlooked demographic, and I think that that's true. I also think at the same time that most ministers would absolutely love the opportunity to connect with university students, and so encouraging your university students to go in and give a couple of churches a try, do a little research online, find a church that seems to fit with who you are, and maybe has something that looks like it would be of interest to you, and then, or to your university student, and then just encouraging them to go and give it a try, plug in. I think that this assumption that university students are not interested whatsoever in spiritual things or in the church during their university years, while there is some truth there, I think it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think that university students, if they're encouraged, will do that. I think they'll go out, they'll try out some churches, and maybe they'll find a community to plug into, and that could be a really life-giving thing, and be a part of their support network while they're at the university. So I would say, don't hesitate to just say, hey, go give a couple of churches a try and see if there's some place that you connect. Especially, for our students that grew up in the church, and to not write off these years and say, oh, once they have kids they'll come back. That's the line that I hear all the time. And while that may be or may not be true, I think that just that little word of encouragement can make a big difference.